digging deeper and deeper into John's first book, Wonders of Spiritual Unfoldment. And John and I were just talking as we were preparing for this recording about Christine, who has been mentioned many times now in the previous recordings. And John, maybe you could share a little bit with us your search for true love, how it connects to Christine and how it connects to your experiences throughout life.
Yes, this event, which started off with a particular woman called Christine, has actually affected my whole life and has never ceased. You see, what it really was, this seeing both through and beyond the physical form of a woman into what I dare to refer to as the realm of spirit, a realm of the infinite, as in contrast to the finite name and form of a particular woman with a woman. This is really the spiritual life in a nutshell. And particularly if those of us that follow the way of love. Now, perhaps here I might just stop, divert for a moment to point out that there are really three great ways of approaching God, approaching spirit. The way of love, the way of knowledge, which is sometimes required to those who work with the heart or the heart or the head. Some people are more heady than others. And the way of action, which is, of course, very popular today and usually takes the form of good works in the outer world. Well, I'm very much a man of devotion, a man who works with the heart. So this realization that took place with Christine was but the beginning of a lifelong process of, which is by no means ended now, of realization, bringing into reality whatever it is we mean by perfect love, love's perfection. Now, I wonder how many people watching this video would claim to have found love's perfection. One might say it's something that isn't possible in this world. And that may well be right, because the search doesn't end with this world. It doesn't end with death. It continues out of this world, very much so, into the heavenly world, the spiritual world. It has no end. And here, of course, I talk about something that is of infinite, whereas my capacity to sit here and talk about it and describe it is very finite. So who am I? I'm not worthy to touch the feet of this subject, but I can only offer to you my best from what I have experienced in this life. So what's contained in just these two chapters is actually continues throughout this book and all of my 10 books throughout my entire life. Of course, the original name and form has branched out into include many other names and forms. It is because although there may be millions of women in this world, once you start getting into spirit, it's very questionable, because how many spirits are there? There's only one, isn't there? One spirit. And those of you acquainted with the Bible will remember that there is, in the Garden of Eden in paradise, in other words, in the spiritual world, there was one man called Adam and one woman called Eve. How is it then that in this world there are millions of women, all of different names? Or they are all women, in fact, but as it were, drops from the ocean of one woman called Eve, one from one original. Well, I suggested something like that, even if not precisely. Now then, let me just go back a little bit. Here was I, a man of 47, was I when this happened to me? It seems I'm still a young man then, in comparison to what I am now. And suddenly confronted this realization of, I'll go back to looking into someone's eyes and seeing into the infinite beyond. That's what I saw. As clear as crystal, not once, but on many subsequent occasions. So what was Christine? Was she a woman? Well, undeniably, but so much more. Where did that end? Now, isn't this in everyone? Well, of course it is, but not everybody has that clarity of eye. Most people's eyes are clouded, so you don't really see into them that easily. You can sort of, more or less convince yourself that the same light's in everybody, but it's just not always very clearly seen. I've often referred in my videos to the way that I was brought up. It's extraordinary how social attitudes towards love have changed dramatically in my lifetime. Throughout my 10 years of schooling, from 7 to 18, which was in an exclusively boys' school, all the masters were almost no women available at all. And so our physical connection with women was very, what you might say, undeveloped. And the way I was first introduced to women was not through sex education at all, as is now so common. It was through what were called the romantic poets and sort of traditional stories of knights and ladies, like sort of medieval knights with armor and tournaments and jousting for ladies confined in a tower, threatened by a dragon. And of course, the knight's job was to deal with the dragon and free the lady. And then they were happy ever after. Well, it seems cuckoo land, doesn't it, compared to today's attitudes? But men were very much, at least I was very much brought up to respect and honor women as someone, as a. See, now men and women are sort of vying with each other, each to sort of, women, doing the same sports and having the same careers and all this sort of thing, and men rearing the children as much as women did. But it wasn't at all like that. When I was a child, men were very much, were expected to be men and women. And there were very clearly defined sort of norms of behavior, which for most people's lives operated in this way. Men were expected to be courteous, respectful. I certainly was. To provide and protect the women of the family, and serve the femininity of the woman. And in turn, the woman served the man. It was a mutual service, honorable service. And it certainly was honorable. You didn't speak hardly of a woman, under the code of good behavior. It was just not done. Yes, I'm telling you this because it may have predisposed me to, when I looked at this Christine, that my sort of first focus was not sexual. Maybe that was partly due to my upbringing. Maybe not. I don't know. I can't really tell you. Who knows how these things happen. What made me see through her into this infinite beyond. But seeing the magnitude of that woman, the potential of what she was, I was filled with awe, A-W-E, that sort of awe, almost worship. I wanted to kneel before her. Of course, I was also a man, and that's still existent, however high and lofty the perception may be, hormones at work. And so I was also a man, and desired her. She was an attractive woman. And so there were these two tensions very much at play in me. And I really emphasize this way I was taught to look at women in the highest rather than the lowest sense. In other words, not so much sexual as honorable. Because that raises the whole relationship of man-woman to one might say, a small spiritual dimension. They become spiritually complementary. Now, what is the aim of these videos? What is the aim of what I call the work? It is this, isn't it? It is transcendent. It is growing from the corrupt mortality of flesh into the incorrupt immortality of spirit. And I assure you, my dear friends, that there's nothing that is more central to this process than the process of love. Now, yes, there's sexual love, no one can argue with that, but it is only the most basic beginnings of love's potential. And if too much attention is focused down there and tend to stay down there, which all too often it does, man is simply missing the point. He's missing the true potential, which is the perfecting of what for most of our experience is probably imperfect. And that's the point I really wanted to make to you. And you see, romantic love tends to be rather laughed at these days, but it is that sort of romantic, poetic nourishment given to us in our early days, what is in my school days, that nourishes this higher, expectation, these higher, what a more gentle word than expectation, this higher orientation. I don't know what the word is. This looking upwards. And I'm sure I'm not the only man that in my early experiences of course, I get a bit forgetful about it now, but I remember often being laughed at as a boy about wearing my heart on my sleeve, being too romantic, and not being realistic about things, and others of my contemporaries would boast about their conquests with women, which of course always meant sexual, and always felt a bit sort of inadequate in that realm. And I was always sort of searching for in my early 20s, what did I know about perfection? But I suppose some sort of a deeper instinct in me was always looking to the stars. Somehow I suppose I kept looking to the stars rather than the bed. Perhaps that was my approach to these things, or rather hoped for both, really. I'm not sure at all which my priority was, but I think the people that always touched my heart most deeply led me to the stars rather than the bed. And I'm very thankful that they did, really, because I feel now at the end of my life unbelievably enriched by this ocean of love's perfection, which seems to embrace me ever more in my old age, so that I go forth from this life. One can almost say love's ecstasy. That love is just beginning, in a sense, now at my age, as it opens up into, well, it's really the love of God, you see. I remember when I was told as a boy that God is love. Of course, what does it mean then? When you think of love in terms of sex, well, what's that got to do with God? God is love, but what is that? Is that sex? Well, with God, all things are possible. Probably it is, but it's only a little bit of it. By the way, I also used to be told that God is a loving father. Well, I had a father, I'm sure he did love me, but he was the sort of traditional Englishman who didn't show his emotions. I don't think he ever hugged me in my life, really. He just wasn't that sort of a man. He never said he loved me, ever, I don't think. So I was always a bit frightened of him, really. When they said God was a loving father, I wasn't at all sure about that. I think if he was like my dad, I didn't think I wanted God. So it didn't really ring true to me when he spoke about God as my father. It just made me even more frightened of him. Anyway, God is love. I didn't make much of that either. But now in my old age, it really seems the most obvious of all statements. In fact, it's the statement that overcomes all other. Do you know, I think on my deathbed, it's the only thing I'll say, the only words on my lips. God is love. That's the conclusion of my life's long search, my dear. And see, this experience with Christine, which took me through the flesh, adorable though that was, into this spiritual realm, was perhaps the beginnings of this. Because, my God, these sort of great realizations, they don't happen overnight. It's nigh on 40 years since that happened to me. And I've been learning ever since through countless other experiences, all of it somehow in some way sort of fed into this dawning of ever more perfect love, which is not dependent on anything. How can it be dependent on anything which is transitory? It is dependent on, well, it is dependent on nothing. Of course, it's an absurd thing to say. What's dependent? Because that's the whole point. It is not dependent on anything. Well, I'm sorry, that was a bit of a wild ramble. I hope you were able to follow it, were you? Oh, perhaps I could, actually, I thought just before we move on further, I thought I might read you just one of many of the poems I wrote during this period. It's not the most powerful of them, but maybe it will convey an impression of what I was dealing with at this time. Okay, let's start. O deepest longing through a night of harvest moon's romantic light, where are you, O my love so dear, to share with me this moonlight clear? O moonlight, love light, midnight clear, O bring to me my darling near. So strong my wish, so deep my prayers, within the moonbeams she appears. No separate form within these beams appears, but as the moon she seems. The moon itself is named your name, my loved one, and the moon the same. As harvest rustlings bend and blow, my love becomes the wind also. No words you speak, nor voice I hear, but you empower the moonlit air. As midst the moonlit cloud she soars, my soul lifts up to dance with yours. And there we loose and cast aside the masks of being identified. Oh, far beyond all fences, free of mortal partiality, as wisps of misting disappear, dissolving into cloudless air. So you and me, whate'er that be, ascending through identity, resolve into our substance pure, and there unite forevermore. So, merged and mingled, two as one, my prayer is met, the dance is done. In moonlight, love light, soft and deep, with you within my heart, I sleep.